What was um, just so? What were some of the first obstacles? Like most people, when they go in the jungle, one of the biggies is just the heat, the insects. What what was it like for you?
Well, there's no heat up there. It was almost 6,000 feet
Okay.
elevation.
Yeah, high
So,
jungle.
yeah, so even though, yeah, it was between 4 and 6, depending what part of the valleys you were in. And so, despite the fact that we were just 6 degrees south of the equator,
Right.
it was not hot. Um, so, yeah, that was, it was mostly, most days either sweater or even jacket weather,
Really?
except in the afternoons when it didn't rain, which were very few. And when the sun shone in the afternoon, it could sting you, even though the air wasn't hot, because the atmosphere was so thin up there.
And then did you sleep with a mosquito net and things
No,
like that? Just
we
out
didn't
and
have mosquitoes at
Really?
that altitude.
I wish I'd have gone there then.
Yeah. But the biggest thing that was not the insects or the weather or anything. It was um, the way the Kimyal people were, their personality. They did not know what to do with, how to approach this person. I was obviously a female, but I was not anybody's wife. I was not a missionary's wife. I was doing what the men missionaries would do. You know, I was in a man's role, but I was a woman.
Uh-huh.
And they just did not know how to handle that or how to approach me. So I discovered it was dependent on what they wanted from me and how they thought they could get it by how they approached me. If they thought they could do it by persuasion, strong persuasion, they would treat me like they would one of their women. You know, if they thought they could get it from me by buttering me up, they would treat me like they would one of their men. You know, so I quickly discerned that difference, and I said in my head, it's not going to work. I know what you're doing. It's not going to work. But I just grew so, I did not like their personality. They were loud, they were pushy, they were boisterous, they, all these, they were explosive. You never knew how close you were to the end of the fuse with them. And one day I said to the Lord, I do not love these people, but I know you love them. So I am going to stay, and I am going to do here what you want me to do. Give them the word. And you know, I learned after a while to see the other side of things. It wasn't that they were just pushy and aggressive and all that. They were focused, and they were determined, and they had a goal and they were going to reach it, and they were up front. They didn't try to trick you like the personality of some other tribes.
So you started seeing the positives.
Yeah, I saw the positive side of
Yes.
them.
I think that's probably not as radical, but that's something that every missionary, when you go into a place, even though it's maybe quite similar to your culture, you're going to find things that because they're different, you're going to oppose it, and it's going to make you angry and things. But if you can make that switch to focus on, wow, the positive aspects of things, then it transforms the way you look at even the negative.
Yeah. I remembered a lecture from my missions professor at Prairie, who was my favorite professor. And he had been a missionary in China and had to march out when the communists, he and his family, and had even had to bury a baby beside the trail as they left the country. And he related a story of having to go down a river on a sampan with 1 million other Chinese people who he did not like. He did not like the Chinese people. But it was an overnight trip. And so everybody laid down on the sampan, and they were like sardines, literally. Were sleeping side by side, head to foot. And a Chinese man shared his blanket with him. And that changed his heart. And he told us, don't go somewhere because you love the people. Go because God does. And that stuck in my head. So when I was there with the Kimyal people and did not feel that love at first, I said, Lord, I don't love them, but you do. And you have brought me here to give them your word. And that just changed my heart, just like it did Mr. Douglas's heart, you know, when he made that change in China.
And God will not only bring a love, but also be able to appreciate the things. I know a friend of mine was working in the Middle East in a refugee camp, and he said people were pulling at him and demanding and lying and stealing, a lot of things, desperate things people do in desperate times. And he said, I was so full of anger, and then he said, all of a sudden, I looked, and there was a young boy, and he said, in the Middle East, some people are more fair-skinned or whatever. And he goes, for a second, he goes, I looked, and I thought, what is my son doing here? How did my son get in the middle of all these men, and why is he dressed? And he goes, all of a sudden, he goes, I looked, and I saw them as my family. I saw them as my son, my father, my mother, my sister, my brother. And he goes, everything changed.
Yeah.
And because God does love people.
He does.
And if we'll just lay aside a lot of maybe even prejudices and arrogance, we'll not only accept people, but we'll also come to appreciate things. Like I came to appreciate things that I realized, I wish I had that in my culture.
Yeah.
Too.
Exactly.
At the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I lived among them, I more and more and more grew to genuinely love those people and appreciate these unique things about their culture that was different even from the tribes around them.
Right.
Each one of the tribes has its own distinct personality, and they just happen to have a very aggressive personality. But it's good. And, I just dearly love them. Dearly love them.